Welcome to the Crafting Character Podcast. Steve Carter here, and in association with my good friends at Preaching Today and Food for the Hungry, I bring you a podcast that longs to help each and every one of you who have been given the opportunity, the privilege, and some days feels like the hardest job in the world, the gift of preaching, and hoping that you get better at your craft. I mean, that's what we all want. We want to be the kind of people that actually are maximizing the gifts that we've been given, but also being the kind of people that our character leads the way. And as we kind of head into the week of Thanksgiving, I know for many of us, we're thinking about formation. We're thinking about Christmas. We're thinking about the series that we're doing, whether you're doing an Advent series or just helping people get ready to prepare their minds and their hearts for the Christmas story. And I love what Preaching Today is doing. I mean, if you're like me, sometimes you just need a spark. You need some help, like looking at, a concept, an idea, because sometimes you just feel the temptation, the struggle to have to teach Christmas in a new way, even though everyone knows that this is a story that was birthed in the Middle East, a small little community of Bethlehem. But I love being able to go to preachingtoday.com. They got this amazing article. It's just called Preaching Nothing New This Christmas, and It Will Be Novel. That just, for me, just the title alone just took so much pressure off. But there's sermon illustrations, there's articles. I go to it frequently, just again for that spark. And just as you are a listener to Craft and Character, they're like our primary sponsor, and they want to help you. And you go to orderptnow.com/cc30 and get 30% off. Next week we're going to have another podcast drop, and we're going to be talking about preaching on mission, how to actually preach and really just catalyze your people towards mission, and why inviting people into the greater mission of the kingdom of God is important. So be ready, be on the lookout for that. But today I'm excited because I get to actually introduce you to someone that you all need to know. And there's times where I'll interview somebody that you've read their stuff, you know their name, you've heard them preach. But every once in a while, like I really want to introduce you to people that I think the world of, people who are actually embodying what they talk about, living it out. And my friend Vanessa Stricker, I've known her, I'd say 20 years. Vanessa is one of the most thoughtful writers and teachers that I know. Vanessa lives out in Orange County, California. For many, many years, she was serving as just an amazing kind of like advocate in a nonprofit that just means a ton to me personally, called Solidarity. And they were doing amazing kingdom work. She's a pastor of Peacemaking and Justice at One Life City Church in Fullerton, California. She preaches regularly. She's just someone who is thoughtful. And if you know me, like I love learning from people who really think before they speak. They just offer questions or curious insights that just always take conversations farther. And I got word about how Vanessa was working on an Advent kind of reflections devo for the entire Advent season. Her church, One Life City, they're actually doing an Advent series, and we're going to talk about that. But this Advent Reflections, I just was super, super impressed by it. And I just think the world of her. And so you're in for a treat, because we're going to talk about Advent and why I think every church, some of you are like really, really doing this already, but like every church, I think, has an opportunity to jump in and prepare the hearts, the minds of their people for the coming Messiah. So without further ado, Vanessa Stricker, welcome to the Crafting Character Podcast.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me here today.
Yeah. It's been 20 years, hasn't it?
Almost. Pretty close.
Oh,
yeah.
Gosh, man. See, look at that. That's wild. That is wild. Okay, so talk a little bit about One Life City and your role there.
Yeah, One Life City Church. We're in Fullerton, California. It's been around about 8 years. We actually just celebrated our 8-year anniversary a couple weeks ago. But I've been, for the past couple years, been pastor of Peacemaking and Justice there. And so my role is to help provide some teaching, resources, opportunities for engagement in the areas of peacemaking and justice. And also really, we see those two words are such big words, right? Peacemaking and justice, but we see those as values that we want to integrate throughout everything we do at the church. So the stuff that I'm overseeing isn't just like a separate add-on ministry, but also really looking at how do we integrate that into the way we do church into the midst of our everyday lives as a really essential part of our discipleship. And so grateful to be at a church that has such a high value in those areas. And yeah, we're a multi-ethnic church, trying to live out what it means to be a community of Christ followers who are loving their neighbors well and embracing the tensions we find living in a broken world, and holding tight to the promises of Jesus.
That's so beautiful. And again, this has just been something that you have been like living out for so many years. And it's been one of the things that has just always impressed me about you is, again, you constantly talk about this kingdom of God, incarnational ministry, peacemaking, justice, but it's something that you do. You love to invite other people into it. I'm curious, like, where did this kind of desire for Advent come? Because again, your church is doing a series on it. We'll talk about that in a moment, but just this kind of heart of the Advent story with your role, with your life. Because for many people, this is a tradition that they're familiar with. Was this something you were familiar with? Or was this something that really in many ways has just been a new journey for you, and it's just meant something that you kind of had to start processing and give away? Give us a little backstory.
Yeah, I didn't grow up celebrating Advent. I've always loved Christmas. The Christmas season has always been my favorite time of the year. And I think it always just kind of feels magical, and, there's joy and excitement and this anticipation. And I've always loved the lights and the decorations and that fresh Christmas tree smell and all of that. And I have like so many good memories from the Christmas season growing up. But I think that Advent is a little bit different than Christmas in itself, right? Sometimes Christmas can become more about almost like the manufactured merriment, right? We're more focused on the festivities and the decorations and the gifts. And we kind of have this ramp up to the big day. And then it's all over and we pack it all away. And so I think at some point I kind of started to wrestle with that. Like, okay, I love this season. There's something special about it, but how does that actually connect to my everyday life? It's one thing to just think about, okay, we're celebrating Jesus coming to earth. Obviously that's a good thing. But it just felt so disconnected. And I think even sometimes when we try to like throw in bits and pieces of Jesus throughout, it still doesn't always make sense. Like, what does that mean that this infant king who was born 2,000 years ago, what does that mean for my life here and now today? And so I think as I started to wrestle through that, and at some point, I think it's just been in the past 10 years that I started to learn about Advent, what it is, and started to observe that for myself. I just found that Advent is a place where it connects, where this baby in the manger connects to the struggle of our everyday lives. And it's not just a focus on the celebration, but I feel like it really invites us into the tension of living in a broken world, and also in the midst of that, carrying this hope of a Savior who redeems and restores in our lives here and now.
That's so good to hear, because I think for many of us, like, yeah, we get so caught up in the Christmas nostalgia. We get so caught up in everyone's coming home. and we get so caught up in the celebration. But there really is a beautiful preparation that Advent, and you do this beautifully as you walk through kind of these 4 Advent reflections that are like 7 days for each of these words. Words like hope and peace and joy and love. Like you have this way at which kind of unpacking them. You're actually teaching in your church's series. Which week are you doing?
Yeah, we do an Advent series every year, a little bit different each year, but normally kind of centers around those 4 different themes. So this week I'll be teaching the second week on peace.
Peace. And, as you've done this, as you were writing kind of these Advent reflections, is this just kind of like a compiled last number of years, like journal entries that you've just done? Like, talk about how these reflections like came to be, and then how people in the church and even people like, far away, like I purchased this, I'm using it, but like, how do you see people all across the country utilizing this Advent reflections piece?
Yeah. It came about really, it was a dream for a few years. Just personally, my husband and I had been looking for an Advent curriculum to use with our family for years. And we've tried out different things over the years and never found quite what we were looking for. As I was talking about with Advent before, of like really seeing it as this time where it connects the birth and the life of Jesus to our everyday lives. I didn't really get that in a lot of the Advent curriculum that we were finding. And so at some point I was like, I think we just got to create our own. And so part of it came about through times that I've preached during Advent in the past. And also I'm a writer. I have a blog that I write called On the Side of Grace. And so over the years in that, I've written a little bit about each of these different themes. So some of it was a compilation of things that I have written or preached on in the past. And then it was also because I was really trying to take, a week on each of these words, really also trying to give a well-rounded view of what is hope? What does that mean? How do we see it in the Bible? What does that mean for us today? What does hope have to do with Jesus? How does it all connect? And kind of doing that with each one of those words. And so I also pull in, other resources. I have links to like some Bible Project videos to look at their videos, kind of giving a word study of each of those words. I bring in, some poetry or some different writers. So just trying to give a really well-rounded view of what each one of these words mean and how we can embody them in our everyday lives.
Well, and I think that's really, really important because I find that these are foundational words, words like hope and peace and joy and love. And in a world that is as divided as ever before, these are kind of the essentials of what it means to be a follower of Christ. Like we're people of love. Like we're Easter people living in a Good Friday world. We're people of hope, and like we are people of shalom making and peace, and we're supposed to be people of joy in every like circumstance and situation, and not trying to negate like difficulty or hard, but again, it's a perspective and it's a view. And you think about Jesus coming into this broken and beautiful mess that is our world. And I think these words, but I would say like hope was a word that I struggled with. Like it felt disconnected because like the way that most people talk about hope is really whimsy. It's like, I hope, the Lakers make the playoffs, or I hope there's no traffic on the highway. All of these beautiful words almost have gotten hijacked and sabotaged in our English language. And we've lost some of the real heartbeat, the soul, the essence. and just, kind of seeing through. And I've tried not to go ahead because, obviously it starts this coming Sunday, after Thanksgiving. And I'm really excited about it. But just to kind of see your ability. And again, it's the writer in you, the pastor in you, the thought leader in you, but your ability to really bring some dirt and flesh and blood and beauty and weightiness to, I think, these words that for many of us have lost kind of their original intent. What was the one that of these four that hit you as like, oh, in this season, like I need that word. I need that word, as a pastor, as a mom, as a wife, as just a friend, as a citizen in the US. Like what's one for you that was like, ooh, this one is what I needed?
Yeah. I think hope is that word for me. And, I love that Advent starts out with hope, and actually, in the first reflection, in this devotional that I created, it really gets into that hope isn't, sometimes we do think of hope as like wearing rose-colored glasses and just hoping that things are going to go our way. But the reality that hope comes out of a place of suffering, right? And even if we're thinking about in that time when Jesus was born and where the people were at in that time, they were had been in the midst of exile and foreign occupation for hundreds of years. And there were prophecies that there was this Messiah that was going to come and that was going to rescue them. And that is where hope was birthed out of, right? And so I think that we have to be willing to not just like hold on to hope as just this lofty thing that we're hoping things are going to work out. But if we really want to experience hope, we actually have to dig into the suffering and the lament first. Being honest with where we're at, being honest with the struggles that we have, with the brokenness that we experience and that we see around us. And it's really in the midst of that, coming out of that lament, that we open up our hearts to God, to speak and cultivate hope within us. And so I feel like throughout, the whole devotional, is really trying to kind of embrace the tension, right? We can hold on to hope and also be honest about our suffering. We can experience joy even while we're in the midst of pain. We can long for peace and like work towards cultivating peace, even when we're still feeling fractured or feeling anxious, So there's really that tension there. And I think that that's an important tension to embrace and be honest about.
When you're communicating that, there's one way, and every medium's different, from a social media post to an Advent reflections that you're doing to a preach and sermon. But what I hear you articulating beautifully is, and oftentimes we, as preachers, we kind of talk about a very bifurcated reality, very either or. It's either you have hope or you don't. There's like it's either really really good or it's really really bad. But you're really talking about this ultimate both and, that, right, to really experience the fullness. And often I think about this, those that have experienced pain, let's say, 4 degrees of pain, like 4 clicks of pain, like, and from like 0 to 10, like they've experienced 4. I heard someone say, like, to the degree of what like you've experienced in pain, on the other side of what you can experience in joy. And but for many people, if we shy away from the suffering or we shy away from the lament, it's not just going to affect our hearts, our souls, our mind. It's actually going to affect our ability to receive the hope or the joy or the love or the peace. And it's that for me has been a massive like shift in, oh man, you better do your work and like lean into this stuff and not just try to escape it. How do you communicate that? So like in a, let's take it to a preach. You got to write a message. You're doing week 2. It's on peace, and this world is divided. It is very fractured. Yeah. So talk about how you articulate that ultimate both and with your audience at One Life City?
Right. Yeah, I think it's important to be honest about the brokenness and the pain that we see around us. And I feel like even kind of starting in that place, right? And it even kind of sets it up for like, why do we need to talk about peace? Why do we need to seek or cultivate peace? Because there is a reality that we live in a broken and divided world, that we experience a lack of peace around us and also internally, right? So to start there, and then I think in order to cultivate peace, like it requires that we step into the tension, right? We can't really fully cultivate peace if we're just kind of trying to ignore it or push it to the side. But we have to be willing to enter into the conflict, to enter into the areas where we're experiencing that tension, in order to experience and bring about the peace that Jesus has to offer, right? He talks about the peace that he gives is different than the peace that the world has to give. The world is going to tell us that peace looks like not having conflict and just basically having everything all together, right? But that's not the peace that Jesus models and that he talks about and that he offers us. So we have to be honest about that tension.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing because so many people subscribe to peacemaking is equivalent to peacekeeping,
Right.
and obviously they're so different. But then, when you think about that, like if Jesus had that mindset, he would have just stayed in heaven. Like, why enter into the brokenness of this, Palestinian area, this place? Like, why enter in? And I think what's so amazing, and you just articulated that so well. But I think for me, it brings to mind, there was an old Trappist monk, Thomas Merton, big fan of his writings, but he often would talk about contemplative activist. And the way that he would kind of articulate it is this, like, if you actually spend time in the presence of God, it's always going to push you out into the brokenness of our world. And if you really fully immerse yourself in the pain and the struggle and the suffering and the stories of people who have been oppressed or who are hurting, you're not going to have answers. And it's going to force you or invite you back into a contemplative place with the Lord to say, God, help. Why? And it so much activism, then back to contemplative. And I think that what I appreciate is, as I'm just kind of slowly, just in prep, trying to look through some of what you wrote. And again, I typically try to read everything with that before an interview, but I really just want to go on this Advent reflections journey with you in real time. But just to see, I feel like you do a great job with the questions of like having moments that bring you into that suffering or into the lament, into the honesty, into the presence of God, but then also let you kind of see how can you carry this into our world well today, and then back into the back out. It's just, there's a good almost like invitation in, flow out that for me feels very, very different than other Advent materials that I've tried to embark on in years past.
Yeah, right. That's what I feel like, even kind of in our journey of looking for Advent curriculum to use with our family over the years, sometimes it just kind of points us to like just doing these random acts of kindness, and that's what it's about. But then again, it's like, okay, but it's just saying kind of, we do these things during Christmas time and then we go back to our normal lives and we kind of forget about that, right? So there is something with creating this space to really sit with God and to reflect. And so I try to do, I kind of have a written reflection that I share for each day, but then also inviting the readers to engage with it in some way, whether that's through reflection questions or through some contemplative practices. Sometimes it's using art, or even listening to a Christmas song, but actually like sitting with it in a way of like, listening to the words, reading the lyrics, and considering what's standing out to you. What might God be speaking to you through this? So having that time of like that contemplative space to really let it sink in, and allow, and not just like to allow the words that I write to sink in, but to allow what God might be wanting to speak to you through that to sink in, so that it becomes more about like, how are we being formed? So that what kind of comes up during this time of Advent, we carry that into our lives throughout the rest of the year, right? It's not just these things we do during this Christmas season, but how is Advent continuing to shape us to be the people of Jesus?
I love that. I think that's so beautiful because, again, we're so good at like moving, from one thing, and then then we're gonna get into the New Year's, and we need New Year's resolutions, and we talked about hope and peace and joy and love like last month. This is now just New Year's resolutions, a new series, a new you, and you're like, no, this is like an opportunity to continue carrying these words. I'm curious for you, like, were there passages of scripture that just kind of surprised you as you were doing this? Like, wow. Because again, there's so much scripture in here. And for any of you who are preachers, just, again, you might have an Advent, you're doing Advent, but you need some extra like content. I'm telling you, this is like 90 some pages of like absolute gold. You're going to want to like go ahead and get it. But also for some of you, you might be like, wow, like we don't have actually a social media play for Advent. What's really, really cool too, I was talking with Vanessa a few weeks ago, and I was like, hey, like, could my church actually utilize this? And she's like, actually, we've created like an opportunity for churches to like actually license it for their people, and you can like make it your own and get that out there. And there's just awesome opportunities. And so I'm just telling you, from a teacher, you should do this, but also for a shaping and to use a word that Vanessa said that I absolutely love, to form your people in this season so that as they enter into 2023, they're carrying these words and helping them kind of dive deeper. It might be an opportunity, and it's super, super reasonable, super reasonable. I was really impressed by that. So, but I'm curious, Vanessa, like for you, were there verses, and then I'm going to put something on the spot. We didn't talk about this, but I had this like wondering, was there like a section of like that you wrote and you were like, oh, it just, because I have this every once in a while, like whether I'm writing a sermon or writing, when I was writing the thing beneath the thing, there was like a couple moments as I was writing that I was like, it just felt different. Like it felt like, man, God, you helped those words come together. And just an opportunity for you to kind of share, hey, here was a section that I just really, really loved writing, and I loved getting to the heart of it. So didn't know if you'd be open to even just reading just a little part of it. Cause, again, I think it's the work that you've done has just been so amazing. So, but first, just any scriptures that stood out to you. And then, if you'd be open to sharing, that would be amazing.
Yeah. There's a couple, I think oftentimes with Christmas, we often focus on the scriptures that kind of talk about the birth of Jesus, right? But the reality is that Jesus coming, the arrival of this Messiah, was like a continuation of this story that had already been playing out for generations. And so some of the scripture that I bring into it's not just centered around the story of Jesus's birth, but, some of it goes back into the Old Testament, like Lamentations, for example, when we're talking about hope and kind of that tension of hope being birthed out of suffering, in Lamentations 3, where it talks about remembering my pain and my suffering, but then also calling to mind like God's faithfulness in the past. And then that's why I have hope, right? So that was one of the verses that I love and that really helped to shape how I understand hope. There's also, in John, right before Jesus is going to be crucified, and he's talking with his disciples, and he talks about the joy that's going to come, but there's going to be this pain that they experience first. And he relates it to the idea of a woman in childbirth and the tension that you see there of the joy and the pain together, right? These aren't two separate things. To have joy does not mean that you don't experience pain, but really gives this beautiful metaphor of what it looks like to have the joy and the pain together, and to allow the pain to push us into the presence of God so that we experience joy. So it was some of those scriptures that really help to shape how I understand those words. And they aren't the normal conventional Christmas scriptures, right?
I think that's so great because, again, I love how you said that, to allow the pain to push us into the presence of God and what the Lord has to teach us. I think, gosh, the ability to actually be shaped and formed with being able to not kind of distract myself from my suffering or sadness or disappointment or trauma, but to actually be able to go, hey, this is true. This is real. This is valid. And so is shalom. And so is hope. And so I think that ability at which you do that. And I think, honestly, these last number of years, I think us as pastors have to look really hard at ourselves in the mirror and our portfolio of work and ask ourselves, did we really shape and form people for where our world currently is? And again, nobody could have predicted a pandemic. Well, I mean, I know there's science fiction novels that did, but I mean, no one really could have understood. Nobody could have seen the way at which our country would be so different. Nobody could have really felt all of the strands of, abuse and oppression and race, all of it hitting and realizing, gosh, for many, many people, they knew a version of a word like hope or love or joy or peace, but they didn't know how to actually sit and be invited into the presence of God in their lament or in the suffering or in the sadness. And I think then when people tried, it was almost like they didn't have the muscle memory and they're like, I don't know what to do. And I'm going to go escape. Unhealthy escapes. And again, I think that's part of the beauty of Advent is inviting us into just the fullness of our world and the fullness of the gift that Christ is for our world. So I just love what you're doing here. If you're intrigued to learn more, go just check out what Vanessa's doing. She's got some amazing blogs, but you can go and check at onthesideofgrace.com. There'll be a link in our show notes. And then you can just kind of go to the menu and click on the Advent reflections, and you can learn more about what that might look like for you and your own personal journey. Because again, for us as preachers and pastors, we're transferring content all the time. And oftentimes we ourselves, for our own soul's sake, we need some stuff that we can just do. So if you already got your sermon series planned, fantastic. That's awesome. But why not use this as a chance just to walk through, be guided by just a wise guide in Vanessa, and just allow yourself the chance just to be filled. And I guarantee you there's going to be stuff that you're going to go, gosh, that's going to help make my message stronger, but it's going to help make your soul and heart stronger. Vanessa, I'm curious, anything you would maybe be willing to read? Because again, I love your writing, and I think again you've just been awesome declaring the reasons why you wrote this. But just I don't know, I feel like I've seen a taste and been following your work for years, and again, you're someone the world needs to know, and you're someone that people need to read. You just have so much good to say, and honestly, it's not just things to say. There's a lot of people who have things to say, but they haven't lived in the mess and the difficulty with people who are just hurting and on the fringe. And you've been a practitioner of this and someone who's not denied words like hope and love and peace and joy. and also denied the suffering and the pain and the sadness and the disappointment and the trauma. So you've embodied caring both well, which I think has just made you someone that I deeply, deeply respect and trust. So with that, anything you might be willing to share?
Yeah. I'll read one of the reflections, and this and this was something. This one is from Friday of the first week. So still thinking about hope, and actually, as I was writing this and thinking through hope and what that means, it really helped to shape my understanding differently. As you know, so this was in writing this devotional. It was also like a growth and a formation experience for me, not just something that I'm offering to other people. So this starts with Genesis 1:1-3 says, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now the earth was formless and empty. Darkness was over the surface of the deep, and the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. And God said, 'Let there be light,' and there was light." There are different ways to think about darkness. Sometimes people equate darkness with evil, but we can also think about darkness as simply a state in which we are not able to see things as they really are, or where the truth is hidden from our eyes. In the very beginning, darkness covered the earth, but the first thing God did was to speak light into existence. Yet he didn't get rid of the darkness. There was still space for the darkness. The light gave life, but the darkness reminded humanity of their limits and their dependence on God. Sometimes we walk around in darkness, our vision obstructed. We fail to see the reality in front of us. We fail to see the truth of who God is and what he wants for us. We fail to see the ways that God is working, but the light is always there. Even in the beginning, God's Spirit hovered over the darkness, waiting to unleash his light. When Jesus was born, God was once again shining his light into the world. Jesus is the light of the world and shows us who God is, who we are, and how God wants us to live. The light is shining, but we have to choose to step into it and let it heal our vision. 2 Corinthians 4:6 says, "For God who said, 'Let light shine out of darkness,' made his light shine in our hearts to give us the light of the knowledge of God's glory displayed in the face of Christ."
Wow. Oh man, I love that. That is so good. I actually there's just so much there. Like we could, now I'm like going, man, I should have started this whole interview with you reading that, because that'll preach. I mean, just that one, like aha moment of, yes, let there be light, which is such a beautiful breath prayer in itself. Like, but he allowed the darkness to still exist, you know? And again, it's such a great setup for what you're talking about in the both and, you know, and there are rabbis who say that at the very beginning, God separated light and dark, and the rest of the scriptures is trying to form a people to separate the light and the dark, you know. And I think that's just what you do so well. Vanessa, thank you for joining us on the Craft and Character podcast. Friends, go check out www.onthesideofgrace.com. Go pick up the Advent Reflections, check in about maybe what this could mean as kind of a Devo supplement to the weekends, or even the series, if you're doing the Advent piece as a way to shape and form and disciple your people into this amazing both and. Can you imagine if we got to Christmas and our people actually understood the weight and the depth of what words like peace and hope and love and joy were all about? And Vanessa just does a stellar job doing that. Join me, because I'm going to be doing the Advent Reflections. I'm excited about it, and I can't wait. If you actually pick it up, let me know. Obviously, we're on social media. You can find me at Steve Ryan Carter at Craft and Character. Like I would love to hear it. Also, you can follow Vanessa. Vanessa, what's your Instagram handle?
On the Side of Grace.
On the Side of Grace. That's what I thought. On the Side of Grace. She's a great follow. There's a lot of great things that she's putting out into the world around peacemaking, her life, justice, obviously grace. And she just does a great job of unpacking the text and scriptures in a way that is accessible, but also is going to invite you into that kind of contemplative activist life, which is just beautiful. Friends, thanks so much for just being on this journey with us. I'm excited. We'll be back next week preaching on mission. We're going to be talking through how we really take a whole community and really have them just kind of embark in a journey of not just doing works of compassion, but actually doing works where the community itself transforms our people to be the fullest expression of who God made them to be. So be on the lookout for that. Check out Preaching Today. Check out Food for the Hungry. They're going to share a little bit of their story next week. I'm really fired up about that. But without further ado, much love, everyone. Grace and peace. And let's not waste this Advent season. Let's dive in. It's the beginning of the church calendar, and let's see what Christ has to teach us as we walk through. Much love. We'll see you next time. Grace and peace.